hope you all had a beautiful day, because we sure have a wonderful show in store for you tonight with Sydney Ross Singer. He is a medical anthropologist and the author of 6 groundbreaking and controversial health books. You may remember him a couple months back where we were talking about the killer culture and how bras might be contributing to disease. And tonight we're going to continue that, talk about some of the myths. I think there was a breast cancer awareness month or something recently where everybody was supposed to buy a bunch of plastic pink products made by slave labor in China to cure cancer. And I'm sure most of our listeners here know that it's going to take a little bit more than that, and there might even be reasons why the cures are not widely known and the causes. So we're going to finish up that discussion, dispel some of those myths, as well as talk about Vibro acoustic disease, which he talks about in his book. The Doc is Out, about thyroid and blood pressure and such. We're also going to get into one of my favorite topics, why farting is not only fun, but important. And if you don't, you may also get some adverse health reactions. So I want to kind of follow up on that. But it's so good to have you here tonight again, Sydney. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Christy. It's so good to be back with you, and I'm glad that you tried some of the stuff we talked about last time.
I sure did. I'm always looking for new ways to, not only improve my life and health, but that of others. And, I lifted the bed, and we both feel great. And as far as the bra thing, when we had talked, I was mostly bra-free, but I still felt, that societal pressure, thinking that, I better put them on in public, which thankfully I don't have to go out in public very often, but I did, just to kind of fit in. And then I, gained the courage to, just not really think or care about what others might think. And the consensus is in, and guess what? Nobody cares. Not one single person has pointed a finger and said, ooh, she's not wearing a bra. In fact, if anything, I get compliments all the time. I mean, not just obviously on definitely not on my breast, but what I choose to wear. And, so I did end up putting a few videos out about that, and even went in and checked out some, what are they called, bras, just to kind of try it for myself, for other women that are weaning themselves off the bras. And so it definitely birthed a whole new life of its own. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, you're welcome, and I'm so glad you did that. And I had an interesting month during Breast Cancer Awareness Month myself. I was challenging. I challenged those myths this year. Every year I cringe at that time of the year. It's just it's so frustrating to see all of this billions of dollars of fundraising to look into but the bra, and they are like deliberately not wanting to look at this. So this year I just was decided to try to do something about it, and I was every day throughout that month I would Google breast cancer myths, and they've been calling the bra link to breast cancer a myth, and they even will sometimes go as far as to lie and say that there are studies that show that have looked into this and don't agree, that this shows that there's no link. Well, that's totally a lie. The only research into the bra cancer link has been positive, showing a big link. And in my study, which is a huge link, it's like bigger than cigarettes and lung cancer, and says that bra-free women have about the same rate of breast cancer as men. Go to cultures where they don't have bras, the women and men have about the same very low rate of breast cancer. But as you constrict the breasts and the whole issue, so their rates go up. Well, there's our study. Then there was a study out of Harvard that found wearing a bra increased your risk of breast cancer 100% compared to bra-free. And then there was a Chinese study, which I didn't get to read because it's in Chinese, but I read about it, and it was they found that sleeping with the bra was a risk factor for breast cancer, and that was about it in the whole world of anything into this issue, because it's a taboo subject, and the medical profession has been doing what they can to not look at this. It's really funny. It's like an elephant in the room, and they're doing everything they can to not look at it, even if it means lying. So I contacted some of the media that was publishing these stories, and what happens is there are nonprofits that are invested in breast cancer treatment and detection, because that's where all the money is. There was even an article recently, like yesterday or today, how amount of money spent on breast cancer detection is as much as on treatment. I mean, that's how much money is involved in this. They make billions doing mammograms on women, which probably also gives women cancer, and not to mention false positives and all these other things. But that's where the money is. So what I did was I contacted these organizations, write these things and send it to the media, and the media just accepts this as fact because it's coming from some group that claims to know what they're talking about. Whether it's the American
readers.
Yes, yeah. But when it's coming from the American Cancer Society, it's considered gospel, and it's like you can't question these people. You know, it's interesting as a sideline, because I know you like to think about things philosophically, and it's really interesting when you think about what is authority. What do you look for to know whether something is true or not? Do you just trust the authority, and as soon as someone with an MD says whatever, it's therefore truth? Or do you feel that you have the ability to think and reason for yourself and come up with an idea or assess whether other people's ideas make sense to you or not? Now, I come from that second school. I use my own head and my own body to make sense of things and try things and so forth. I don't just take gospel what anybody says. It has to make sense to me. I don't believe authority says necessarily truth. Unfortunately, the way our culture works, the medical community is the final authority. And if someone with an MD makes a statement, you can't refute that, unless maybe you have an MD also. Mm-hmm. And then it's like the clash of the titans or something. But other than that, if an MD says something or comes from the American Cancer Society, as far as the media is concerned, that's a legitimate source. So I had some interesting experiences talking to different media people. One network ran on TV the myths, and it said bras, and it was part of this slideshow thing. And I called the guy and I told him who I was, and I said, this is not true, because the thing said, consensus says, medical consensus is that there's no link. I said, you notice there's not even any evidence. Consensus means it's their opinion. So you ask a bunch of doctors. You can't call something a myth because a bunch of doctors decide it's not true without any evidence, and with the evidence in the contrary. So I told this to this guy, and that guy said he was going to look into it. And they changed that. They took it out of the slideshow, which was across the country and all of these things. They replaced it with a slide, another myth that men, something about men not getting breast cancer as much. They were trying to sell male breast cancer. So that was, they replaced the bra thing, took it out as a myth. Then there was another station that in the Midwest, I forget which one it was, but they refused to even question the American Cancer Society. To them, that was gospel. I finally, after talking to their manager and getting up on the top level of the network, trying to say, look, you can't justify your position. Well, they finally, because they had the actual statement that the literature does not support the link, implying, and that research does not support this, implying that research has been done and it's been shown false. And I'm showing them that no, that hasn't happened, and the only research is positive, showing that there is a link. So they finally condescended to taking it out of their story as it was, and there was even a video part of it, and then they kept that it was a myth. And they reverted to the line that consensus is. So what happened was, think about what, and I asked these people to reflect, but you can't talk to these media people. They're just following orders. They're not independent in any way. So they just will do the story. And but I was saying, notice what's happened here. Here is a major organization. The Komen Foundation was doing this too, and the American Cancer Society. They worked together, and they were arguing that the bra link was false and that there was studies that suggested it was false. I showed you that that was wrong, that there are no such studies, and in fact the reverse is true, and that this is a cover-up. And the answer that these people came to is, we're still going to accept that this is a myth. We're still going to have an attitude against this issue, say it doesn't deserve any research because in our opinion it's just false. And then the media took that. I mean, to me, that's the basis of an investigative report. How can something as august as these cancer societies that are the lead opinion makers for government and the public come up with false information, misinformation, then be forced to correct that misinformation and still carry the same conclusion, and the media just lets it happen? So that's what I discovered. I mean, this is the nature of the culturogenic disease, and that, the culture is so invested in this, they can't question their authority. They know if they do question this, they're going to have some big moneyed feet on their throats, because there's no way, there's too much money to prevent this disease. Breast cancer is too profitable to prevent. And that was mind-blowing for me. I know I study this stuff. I mean, this is really, Christie, what culturogenic disease is all about. It's about how the simple answer, it's simple. You're binding your breasts. It's tight. Of course it's going to cut off circulation, and that'll make them sick. I mean, it's no real major, you don't have to know space science to know this. But to accept it, to get the authorities to accept it, to fight the lingerie industry, which is multi-billions of dollars, that's going to face lawsuits. They're fighting for their lives on this. They don't want this information, and on so many levels. And then women being so shamed. So that's why I'm really very happy that you have the courage to test that for yourself. It's amazing how women will say, I can't go out. Like they're slaves. They cannot go out in public. They're so shamed. It's amazing to think how you can be so shamed that you cannot go out. I mean, you read articles about it where people agree with this, but they say, well, but of course women can't go without their bras today, so therefore, and what's really sad also is shapewear is coming back. Corset is coming back. I've been looking at shapewear it's called. And, maybe because all these people are obese, they want to try to shove it into something and reshape their bodies, and maybe that's part of the whole thing. But body acceptance and body image disorder is one of the facets of this whole breast cancer issue, as well as
what it is. You hit the nail on the head there, Sydney, because the whole thing is, it's like we might fear, what are they going to think? Somebody might be looking at my boobies or something. And, when you find after you do it, that doesn't happen. It's all in our heads. And, maybe our mom or our dad or someone close to us might say, you have to wear a bra because then your boobs are going to sag, which is totally untrue, by the way. That's another thing I wanted to share through personal experience. And when I first put up my videos, people are like, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm a D, I'm a double D. Only you flat-chested women can do this. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I stood up and, I am a D double D, and my breasts literally have perked up since I have gone no bra anyway at all, because I guess those muscles are rebuilding themselves after 30 years or 25 years of constriction. I obviously don't know the mechanics on that. All I do know is that it is happening, and it's not uncomfortable at all anymore.
And did you have any menstrual pain in your breasts before?
I did, yes. My breasts used to hurt so bad, like right before my period and maybe the first day or two, but now none. None.
That's what I was, exactly. That's something that we've heard from a lot of women, and what seems to be happening is because before women are wearing the same size bra pretty much all month, but their breasts actually get bigger before their period because there's fluid retention when your estrogen level spikes. So it's that part of a body flush, which relates to another issue, by the way, that we should talk about. Menopause and how to deal with hot flashes, because this is all about cleansing issues. But I don't know if you want to talk about that now or later, but we should write that down, menopause, because it's a really good way to deal with it. It's all part of elimination issues. But anyway, so that time of the month your breasts are bigger and you're wearing the same bra, so it's even more constricting, and that causes the pain. And a lot of women's cysts get bigger that time of the month also. But they get rid of the bra and that just stops happening. So it's I'm glad that that's what you experienced, because it's a relief for a lot of women, just getting rid of that pain.
Well, as well, I do just want to mention this. During the break, you also asked me a few other questions of what I've been experiencing about, like, shape and size and such. And I mean, hopefully we're not getting too graphic here, but and many of you know me. You've heard me joke about my eggplant that used to be breasts. And that's because, while I was wearing bras, they had, I don't know the specifics, but I'll guess it had something to do with losing the muscle tissue and, maybe the cellular structure, but they were kind of concave, where your breasts start at the top. They were, would kind of dip and then point out. Well, now they're more like peaches. They're round. They actually, there's more of a firmness. There's more shape to them. That the drooping, sagging went away, and I'm totally not joking you. So I was really amazed, because I was kind of worried, oh my gosh, they're going to be hanging all the way down to my belly button, and, they're going to be really, really, really big, long eggplant. But, no, they're not. They're perky little fruits.
No, and actually the droop is created by the bra, because your breasts have this artificial support that makes the internal ligaments that normally suspend the breast tissue atrophy. They get from non-use. And if you put your arm in a sling all the time, your muscles, atrophy, and you get reliant on the sling. Well, it's the same with the breasts. So, so that explains a lot about the droop.
Definitely.
So, what other? Do we want to segue into some other culturogenic diseases?
Absolutely, but let me ask you this quickly. A question just popped up on the chat. She's asking, she's read your books, by the way, and says they're wonderful, but she also asks, what if your cysts never go away even without a bra?
Well, if you're certain that it's a cyst, that's a question. I would do massage. And try to open up the tissue, and if the lymphatic pathway has been that compressed, that there's this backup of fluid that causes the cysts. That's how they're forming, is that the fluid in the breast has to leave, mostly to the armpit lymph nodes and through the lymphatics. And if the lymphatics are blocked, the fluid backs up, the tissue is getting congested, and eventually pockets form, which become these cysts. And over time, the material in that cyst becomes fibrous as connective tissue and fibrous tissue develops, and you get fibrocystic breast disease. And so it's like a progressive process. And I don't know how far you might be in that process. What you think of as a cyst may be more fibrous tissue, but I would massage it. And, a lot of women, breast massage is excellent. You can do it yourself. You can have a partner do it or whatever. It's just, the idea is to just get used to what your breasts feel like. Any sore areas, just gently loosen the tissue and massage it. And most of it, there are videos on how to do breast massages, and but it's pretty intuitive if you just get to know your body and don't be afraid to touch it. And if you feel anything that's sore and tender, just do massage on it and release it and learn how to do that, you can do that, and you recover your breast health to a large extent. But if you've been doing this since you're like 9 years old, I mean, that's why early puberty, which is coming on earlier and earlier with all the hormones in our food, I mean, these kids are hitting puberty at 7, 8, and, you know, little girls are developing breasts already. So the first thing you do is strap them in the bra, because that's the way the culture deals with it. And it's the rite of passage. And now suddenly they have these bras on a little developing body, putting pressure on the breasts, so they're not going to develop right. And you're going to have these pressure. Imagine where the bra leaves the red marks when you take it off. That's all signs of constriction and compression. That's not good. So if you do that over time, I mean, imagine what happens to a tree when you take a little sapling and you have like a band around it, like when you bought it from the store and it had its tag on it, you forget to take it off, and as it grows, you'll find that it'll completely suppress the growth of the bark around it when it gets to constriction. Take it off, it's not going to immediately recover. It's going to, you know, the human body is a lot more flexible, and we can make changes a lot faster than a tree. But you could see the effects of pressure over time, especially when you bring it for years. You know, that's the nature, Christie, of these culturogenic diseases. They're cumulative, where a little bit each day you might not feel so much, especially in the beginning, and you get used to it. But the problem is, the problem never goes away. And it adds and adds. After 20 years, 30 years of doing this type of thing, you suddenly have, you know, major circulatory problems and deterioration issues, which you may be able to correct by immediately getting rid of constriction and doing massage and giving your body a chance to heal. But it's going to take time. Different women will respond differently, and depends on how much damage was done over their lives and how tightly they wore their bras, how long each day. And you know what the scary thing is? Women are now sleeping in their bras more than ever. It is a new trend.
They are. They're told. I mean, based on the comments on my videos, they're told, well, my mom told me if I don't sleep in it, then, you know, everything from they're either not going to grow or it was just amazing, the things that I had heard that people's parents are telling them about the bras. So it is a total culture-related myth. And I feel so much better without it 100% of the time now. So well, you know, I thank you for leading the way in this study. I really do. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you for doing that. And a lot of women around the world have heard this message. Dress to Kill is now going to be coming out in the Czech language. It's already in Chinese and Korean and French and Russian. So it's getting around the world, because as these cultures, especially especially in the East, as they've developed bra wearing as a habit, their breast cancer rates are soaring, and they're all sleeping in them too. Like 80% of the women in these countries are sleeping in their bras, and the breast cancer rates are like bigger than U.S. rates now, just skyrocketing. So they know it's something new, you know, and it's not just the junk food. I mean, the diet delivers the toxins, but the bra keeps them in the breast. It just constricts and chokes the breast, so you're sitting and marinating in whatever garbage you're taking into your body, as well as the debris and metabolic waste that your body makes when the tissue is congested, you know, and low in oxygen, low in sugar, high in waste products. The buildup of free radicals happens. There's all sorts of endogenous toxins versus exogenous from the outside, and both of them. So anyway, we live in a polluted world, and you don't want to wear tight clothes that prevent circulation from removing it from the tissues. That's the bottom line lesson, and it applies to everything in clothing. You don't, it's not just the bra. It's socks and girdles and tight belts and tight underwear and necktie. Anything tight and elastic is used to conveniently hold things on, but it holds on by constriction. And, you know, so elastic, I hate elastic. I think it's one of the worst offenders. You know, you can't help but take that stuff off and have deep red marks from where the elastic was digging in. And you could stretch, and the thing is pants. You stand up with pants and sit down with them, and it's a completely different experience with your waist, because when you sit down, your waist expands. So your pants, you know, to make them tight enough when you're standing and not fall down, you have to, make them tight for that. And then it's not too tight, but just tight enough that they stay on. And then you sit down and they're really tight. So it's like we need different sizes for different body positions, but we have clothing that doesn't accommodate that. It's we have to fit our body to the clothes. You ever see people at the beach in the summer where they have these huge bellies? They're like obese people. But their waist is like tiny from wearing tight jeans. They'll have like their butt is really tiny and their legs might be tiny and they have this huge belly above it. Have you ever seen that?
Oh, yeah. Yes. Once or twice.
It's like that's the body actually changes the shape. It gets its shape changed by these clothes. And, of course, that's been being done by the corsets and foot binding. So we are as an animal, the human animal, regardless of this period in history, loves to change and tweak nature. And it does it in different ways that it calls fashion, that reflects its own particular cultural trips. And whether it's primitive peoples and so-called, doing things to their bodies. I mean, they did a lot of weird things to their bodies, too. It's not like just because they weren't modern industrial society, they were doing everything perfectly right. I mean, there was a lot of body mutilation done throughout history in all sorts of cultures. And we're no exception. Mm-hmm. And the funny thing is, when you're living in the culture, you think it's normal, so you don't question it. And when you get these diseases, you go to the doctor, and they're doing the same thing, so they think it's normal. So they don't even question it. They'll just treat the problem and wonder why you have that. Because they're wearing the same stuff, Mm-hmm. It's like everybody is part of the same culture, making the same mistakes. And then industries are selling the products, and then medicine is making money on the disease, and they don't want to blow the whistle because there's an industry that's going to get very pissed off, whatever it is, whatever we're talking about. And it could be cell phones or it could be any product. And this is a really good segue to Vibro acoustic disease, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
What we live in, I discovered this, actually. I should give you some background. Are we near commercial, or should I not go too much into it right now?
We have about a minute or so, minute and a half maybe.
Okay, well, that's not enough time to get into it fully. Let's do it after the commercial. But what I want to say is this is a general pattern that we've discovered that describes how culturogenic diseases work. There are, industries that provide products and services that may be harmful. And maybe they don't even know it in the beginning, but when they started these new products and services. But after time, these things can be shown to be harmful. And, of course, these industries resist that information because there's liability issues and that's their livelihood. And then you have a medical industry that looks the other way because their job is very much like this is an insight that I recently had on medicine. When you think about the history of medicine, it's mostly the biggest developments were during wartime. And in fact, the Surgeon General was a military position. I mean, the military and medicine go hand in hand because of all the combat injuries. So medicine is a very important part of all military stuff. And when you think about, if you were to ask a doctor who is out in the field, in battlefield, how do you prevent all of these battle injuries? The answer, if you reflect, would be end the war, I mean, the war is the cause of these things. But these guys are not responsible for those questions. They can't end the war. Their job is to clean up the mess and to go out there and get the bodies and try to do what they can with them. Mm-hmm. So medicine is not there to prevent disease. They're there to treat disease. And they have to leave the prevention to some other industry, and nobody really is invested in that.
Absolutely. Very well said, Sydney, but it is that time. We will be right back after this short break. Gosh, we could do 20 shows just on all the things you mentioned here during the break, Sydney, but we do want to talk about vibroacoustic disease, and I read a couple of your articles, and one of them really surprised me. This is bad vibrations, the health hazards of geothermal and wind turbine noise. And of course you mentioned computers and such, which computers and cell phones and things are, and refrigerators, are part of our daily lives. So what are some of the damages or what are some of the symptoms that we may, be acquiring vibroacoustic disease?
Well, first let's explain what is going on. There's when people are aware of how like EMFs from wireless communication and all this type of stuff can impact people and hurt your stuff, like all these microwaves around us. Well, these are all part of the spectrum of vibrational energy spectrum. When you go down the spectrum to a certain band, we can hear that kind of energy, and that's sound energy. And in the low end of sound energy is what's called the low frequencies, which are from like 100 hertz down to zero. These low frequencies get to be where it's at the bottom end of what a human can hear. And below like 20 you can't hear, and that's called infrasound. Now, the energies that are happening, just because you can't hear them, it doesn't mean they're not affecting you. And different parts of your body have resonance with these frequencies, depending on what part of your body. And it just so happens your chest, your lungs, and your head all have resonant frequencies below 100 hertz. So these low-frequency noise that we have as part of our noisy world actually affects your body. And what it does is it vibrates it. It causes a vibrational injury to the tissues of your body. And it causes the extracellular matrix, which is the space between the cells, the cement that glues your cells together, actually gets thicker under the influence of low-frequency noise. And such low-frequency noise is such, to give you an example, airplane noise, that, you feel that deep type thunder when you feel it shaking your body. And those are really loud, low frequencies. Living near freeways and along roadways, driving in your car, believe it or not, when you measure these, it's over 100 decibels, which is very loud, of these low frequencies noise that you can't hear. So it's like, almost sounds like a contradiction, a noise you can't hear. It's like light that you can't see, but we know there's ultraviolet light, you can't see it, and that affects your body. Well, here, these low-frequency noises actually affect your body, and it causes it to vibrate and to tear apart over time. And the symptoms of this, and people, well, let me just give you more background before I tell you the symptoms. The people who were involved in this was first discovered and worked out like 30 years ago on airplane pilots and flight attendants and people that work in the aircraft industry near noise. And so it was considered in the beginning an occupational problem. And it was thought of to be a nervous disorder because what happens with this is you get sleeplessness is one problem. You get the difficulty sleeping. You can get rage reactions, depression, suicidal tendencies, and just general cognitive loss. It's like you become dull. And in fact, in some of these places, like guys who work on submarines, exposed 24 hours a day to low-frequency noise because of the diesel generators that create it. It's created by windmills, which is considered green energy. And that's how I got into this, by the way, because here in Hawaii, there's right now a big push for alternative energy throughout the country. And there's geothermal. We live on an active volcano, and they already have one geothermal plant. They want to make more of them, where they actually drill the volcano and tap the heat to run their turbines. And then there is more wind energy that they're pushing too. And the wind turbines actually can send this low-frequency noise 20 miles away. And
wow.
the sound of drilling from all the fracking that's going on the mainland there where you guys are, that drilling, people who live near the drilling wells that live near them, not just work at them, that live and sleep near them. That's the worst, is when you're like sleeping with it. They have all these diseases that develop. Animals are getting sick. So it's like it affects life. It's a vibrational noise pollution that is so embedded in our noisy culture that the government doesn't really want to talk about it. They used to have a program for noise mitigation. It was a big fund that they had for that when the Concorde came out in the 70s and stuff, and all the sonic booms that were going on. They developed a department for noise mitigation and trying to stop all the noisiness. And we're getting very noisy culture. And it was hurting people. But then that got defunded during the Reagan years. And the research is not being done, even though there was research that was done, even on wildlife. It affects animals and birds. I mean, animals leave if they can because they're getting this vibrational noise. And some animals communicate with infrasound. Elephants communicate with like 20 hertz noise that travels miles. And the thing about low frequencies is that they travel farther than high frequencies. Like if you know the boom boxes that kids use in cars, I don't know if they do it on the mainland like they do it here, but really deep bass and you can hear
I remember the 80s with the home speakers in the trunk.
Well, they're still doing it here, but there's like that big bass that you can hear it coming, and you hear the bass. You don't hear the treble part because that is more foliage, trees, all that will block higher frequency sounds that are in normal hearing range. But when you get to low frequencies, the waves spread out because the wavelengths are in meters as opposed to centimeters for the higher frequencies. So they're almost like horizontal, and they travel through matter. So you cannot easily put up a sound barrier to low frequency. So when you're in an apartment and you hear your neighbor's stereo or TV, you hear the bass more than you hear the other stuff. And it's that deep stuff. So what's happening is the other symptoms they found out, it's not just a nervous disorder. And some of these people, by the way, get zombie-like. That's one of the characteristics. Some of these guys on like aircraft carriers where there's all this LFNs, low-frequency noise, they'll actually walk off the edge of the aircraft carrier right into the ocean. Some guys will walk in front of the engines of airplanes and get sucked into the turbine. It's like this low frequency. Imagine taking your brain and just shaking it and vibrating every cell. Your whole body is like vibrating, and it rips things. So the matrix thickens. So what happens is the heart, all the vessels, the blood vessels get thicker. The pericardium that surrounds the sac surrounding, and this is without inflammation. So it's not like an inflammatory disease. It's like a connective tissue disease without inflammation. And you can do an echocardiogram and see thickened pericardial tissue, which is the sac that surrounds the heart. That gets thicker. The lungs, the pleura gets thicker. And it causes tumors, and even the chromosomes get cleaved from this vibration. And this is like stuff that we live with, okay? So if you live near an airport, or you live near a freeway, or you work in a job, other people that get this are DJs. Disc jockeys, people who go to raves with that loud, big bass and the big speakers, and they get into this trance dance type stuff. Wow. They are really damaging their health, and respiratory problems become common. You'll get a cough. You'll have issues that you might think are something else, but it's caused by this vibration. So people get blood pressure problems. The whole body suffers. And now, how do you know if you're suffering from this? Okay, this is not like push the panic button. Mm-hmm. How do you know if you're suffering? Well, since you can't hear these very well, and sometimes people go crazy trying to figure this out. So when we come back, I'll tell you how you can tell whether you're being exposed to this or not.
Okay, and we have a lot of good questions as well, but yeah, I remember years ago, like even if somebody would have a TV on, upstairs, say, in their house with no sound, I've always been able to kind of feel and sense, the kind of humming that everyone else is looking at me like, what's wrong with you? I don't hear anything. So, yeah, there's definitely something to this. So we will discuss this further after this short break. Please continue. You were going to share with us some of the symptoms?
But before I do the symptoms, we said some offline that I think I need to just to go into about the meter, how you measure this stuff.
Okay, yeah, because somebody did ask, that was one of the questions, was how can you test for these noises? What meter can we buy?
Yeah, well, the sound meters, the problem is, and this is the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, has approved the use of what's called A weighting on the meter reading. So when they take these meters, they use the A weighted scale, which means it has a filter to not measure the low frequencies and the high frequencies that go beyond human hearing. Because the idea is, if you're worried about noise pollution and you get a noise meter, it'll reflect what humans hear, which is actually kind of limited. There's a lot of other animals that hear different frequencies than we do, and just because you can't hear it doesn't mean it's not hurting you and not affecting you. So it's kind of it's very unfortunate that that's the way the laws are written. Actually, the laws state, using A weighting for like noise pollution statutes, they'll say by A weighting, and if you look at decibel readings, they'll say dBA, and that A in parenthesis after the dB, which stands for decibel, the A means A weighted, which doesn't measure these low frequencies. So you have to use C weighting, which basically gets rid of that filter and measures what's really there. And then you suddenly see, oh my goodness, look at all this noise, intense decibel. It could be 100 decibels, that if you were able to hear it, you'd be holding your ears with pain, but you can't hear it, but your body is still reacting to it. So now how do you measure it? You can measure it by, if you want to buy a meter, you better have a lot of money, because they're like $5,000 to $8,000 for a good meter. The little cheap meters that you can get at Radio Shack, whatever, they won't measure these low frequencies. And you need a good microphone on them to pick up these low frequencies. So it's it can be measured. But it is something you need special equipment for. So what do you do in your home to know if you're being affected by this is you can feel for vibration on your window panes. And if you have like a factory across the street or down the road or some noise-making something that you feel is disturbing at times, you will, if you feel the window on that side of the house, it'll be vibrating most likely more than the other windows. You could have multiple sources. And the other thing is, when you have multiple sources of noise, they form nodes at different places in your house. So some of these people that complain about, I hear this humming in my ears. I mean, these are the symptoms, okay? You can feel, some people feel a vibration. They might not be able to explain it. And people think they're crazy, but they'll say, I feel something. I just feel like I'm being vibrated. Their ears might feel it. And this is another interesting symptom. They'll feel more sensitive to sound, like you're irritated, and everything sounds too loud. And if there's a TV on and you're the one that's going to be saying, if you're suffering from this, you'll be saying, turn it down, and some people get so sensitive to the vibration, like their ears are just overstimulated and they don't want any more. So the sound just sounds too intense and they don't even go out. They become recluses because of this. They don't even want to go in public. They don't want to sit in a restaurant because there's a compressor from the refrigerator, and the compressors make frequency noise, or the air conditioner will bother them. These noises of machinery bother them, and because that's a sign, one of the symptoms. So the other thing is coughing, having respiratory problems that you don't know what it's from, feeling depressed, sleepless, waking up with a panic. And I'll give you another interesting study that they did. To study the effect of these low frequencies below the hearing threshold, there was this, they took a group of people and they played a concert for them of classical music. And then they took the same concert with a different group of people, but underneath they played 20 hertz at a loud decibel, but nobody could hear it. And people reported anxiety and panic and stress of all sorts and depression and like fear and all sorts of things were revoked. And since I've been reading about this stuff and thinking about it, you look at some of the movies that are out now. I mean, these guys, the acousticians know this, okay? Yeah. And they can manipulate your moods in movies with the sound. Yeah. So you ever hear like that deep, when you know it's a dangerous thing, they'll have this, really deep bass, and it's probably even infrasound is being used, and it creates a sense of fear and heightened anxiety in the listener, even without you knowing it. Okay, so this is subliminal. So anyway, we're all victims of this, okay? And so what you can do is to not worry about yourself, but if you're suffering, I suggest anybody who has symptoms that are general, like I've just mentioned, there could be a lot of things causing this. You can have too much caffeine. I'm sure that'll exacerbate this. It could be a lot of things that can create some of these problems. So it's hard to just point a finger without like really studying the situation. So what I do, if I was anybody living in an urban setting especially, is, do what I suggested about, look in a bowl of water, look from the side and from underneath, see if there's vibration. If you're living in a vibrational environment where you're feeling like you're being vibrated, then your windows will be vibrating and water in a bowl would vibrate. And that'll tell you you're in a bad environment for that. And you shouldn't be sleeping in that and staying in there. It affects children. It affects even children in the womb. There was a study that was done that found a whole family, including a 10-year-old kid, already had thickened heart structures. So I think a lot of and this causes strokes too. Imagine anything that would cause blood vessel disease. The connective tissue is getting thick. It's going to it's going to have different properties. So it causes these focal lesions in the brain and strokes and tumors and increased mutations. So it causes a lot of problems. I think it's an overlay on everything else we have. It's one more level of pollution. And the irony is, here I am in Hawaii, okay? I'm a lifestyle expert, so I try to live in a good lifestyle, in a healthy place, eating my own food, living completely off land, living with clean air, except when the volcano is going. And now they're doing geothermal and wind generators throughout the country in beautiful places like where we live, which are rural and out of the way, because we want to get away, but that's the exact reason that they put these things in those areas, because there's not many people there. Mm-hmm. So the irony, just listen to that irony. You want to get away, so they put these noise-polluting activities out in the boonies to get away from the urban areas, but the people in the boonies pretty much are trying to get away from that. So it's very frustrating. I'm speaking from personal experience now, because a lot of people in this area are feeling extremely threatened by the proliferation of geothermal. It's like the volcano here is active, and it's a big source of energy. And Hawaii is thinking, oh, wow, this is a great domestic sort of source, in-state source of energy, and we could be less reliant on fossil fuels. And it sounds really great. And so does the wind energy, because they both sound like they're, clean and renewable. But when you get into the noise pollution issue, it's a real issue, and people living around these facilities are complaining of sickness. And then the problem is that the industry wants to be in denial. The government is working closely with the industry. The medical industry is not getting paid to do any research, so they're not going to do any. So it's one of those, again, like side effects of modern life, like stress, like all the other things we deal with that take a hit on your life. But there is one other thing to talk about the thyroid, which is extremely important, and I see that as the next topic probably after the next break. So maybe we should answer some questions people might have about this issue so far, because you said got some.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so the one question I already asked you was about what meter we could buy, and I guess, you answered that already. Now, The wind okay. Is the wind noise? Oh, they were asking if the wind noise was from the blades or the generator. And I think that was when you were talking about the wind turbines.
Yeah, I think it's from both. And you can mitigate some of this by pitching the turbines different, blades differently. But compressor noise, air conditioners, any turbines, diesel generators, all of these things make this type of low-frequency noise. Airplanes, flying an airplane. In fact, in the airplane, the oscillation of a jet going through, fast, it oscillates because of the wind hitting it on the fuselage, and that creates low-frequency noise. Not just the actual jet engines, but it's just moving through the air. In fact, low-frequency noise comes from volcanic action, from wind. The Earth makes noise. And this is low frequency. In fact, even in Hawaii, this is interesting. There is throughout the world, we have one here in Kona, on the Kona side, to detect, as part of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, to detect if there's any nuclear explosions in the world. They have these low-frequency noise detectors that can pick it up. So if anybody does any explosions, you can hear it from these facilities. And submarines communicate with the mainland when they're way out in the ocean, 1,000 miles more, with low frequencies. So these, and when they talk about what's happening with whales, when the military is doing these sonar things and they actually will explode these high decibel, low frequency noise, and that'll travel hundreds of miles, and it will cause hemorrhage in whales. So, I mean, we live in a lot of noise, and it's affecting wildlife, it's affecting people, and it's one of those topics that no one wants to talk about. And people researching this, I've been told, have been even threatened by the industries that, like the windmill industry and so forth, because there's so much money going into that now. I mean, all the federal government in the United States is really wanting to promote alternative energy to get free of oil, and it's really putting billions of dollars into this stuff. So when you've got that much money, and then there's just like that, it's build it first, and then let the people complain about it afterwards. And that's the typical of culturogenic diseases. That's why we keep on getting sick, because we don't put people first. We don't put the health of people. I mean, I've read arguments here in Hawaii, people saying, well, move. You don't like it? Move. So, you're being selfish, wanting to be in a pristine environment. We need the energy. They want to ship this energy from the Big Island to Oahu, Honolulu, the big city. So they want to use the neighboring islands as energy resources to outsource their energy pollution, because all energy makes pollution, everything, even making solar, because the solar panels, production of solar panels is extremely toxic. It uses greenhouse gases that are like thousands of times worse than carbon dioxide, and it pollutes rivers like crazy. So they make them in China and places where there's no environmental protection, and then we import the panels and think of it as clean energy. The fact is, all energy is polluting in one form or another as you create it, and we are used, in the United States, we're used to outsourcing our pollution of the energy production to other places. And now that we're trying to be green, trying to be sufficient, and they're calling it green, we're actually bringing that pollution home. So, it really is a lot of issues. This is all the basis of culturogenic disease.
Definitely. Okay, very well said. Now, what about, someone's asking, what about people that work in factories or with power tools? Okay, so same thing. Anything
of course.
Okay.
The thing is, though, if you work in them and go home at night to a quieter environment, you're less likely to have problems than if you live in a noisy area getting LFNs, so low frequency noise. So people who work in those environments definitely will have problems, and those will be occupational disease from low frequency noise. And one of the things is it affects your thyroid. I want to go to the thyroid. This is a discovery that we've made that people should know about. I think some ancient, maybe Ayurveda or something knew about this. I think I might have read something about that, but I'm not sure. But what we found is the thyroid is very much influenced by vibration. And it's a very important organ. It's your pacemaker for your metabolism. It's like a thermostat, actually, is a better metaphor. And if you have too much thyroid, you're hyperactive, you're thin, you overheat easily, like you're turned up. And if you're low thyroid, you're lethargic and you're cold sensitive and you just sort of low metabolism, you gain weight, that kind of thing. So the thyroid is a very important organ, and it's located on your Adam's apple area, your larynx, right below your Adam's apple. And it's shaped like a butterfly surrounding your throat. So if you were to feel for your Adam's apple right in the middle of your throat, and then just go right below that and put your fingers on one thumb on one side and your index on the other side, that's where your thyroid is. Now, if you massaged your thyroid, you will release thyroxine, because thyroxine is stored in the thyroid in a gel-type substance. Mm-hmm. And massage therapists know if you massage the neck, you're going to release thyroid. So they don't want thyroxine. They don't want to do that to people who might have thyroid issues. So any stimulation of the thyroid can release thyroxine. We're going to talk about, when we come back, some interesting aspects of that.
I'm just kind of sitting here thinking, wow, I guess it's safe to assume that pretty much everything electrical isn't healthy for us.
Well, it's all a matter of, you're probably right, and they all have resonant frequencies, and our bodies resonate with these things. And but moderation would probably be okay. But when you add these things on top of all of our you can minimize. Just you can't be extreme about it and freak out about it and be oversensitive and hypersensitive, because once you start getting into panic mode, everything gets worse. It's like you exaggerate in your own body the effects of everything because of your own fears. So I'm cautious not to spread fear about these things, but we have to have knowledge and be able to make choices, and that's why I hope people can use this information. The thyroid information. The thyroid this is a really good one and really easy for people to test on themselves, a good self-study. I was talking about, how the thyroid happens to be anatomically located right on top of a vibrating organ, which is your voice box, your larynx. And, my personal philosophy is that the human body has an amazing design to it. That's an intelligent design. And it works a certain way. And I think there's a reason, in other words, for things being where they are and for why we have what we have. Medicine doesn't share that, They don't like to think about things that way, that there's a purpose or anything like that. So they don't look at why the body. They never ask the question of why, because that implies some sort of a purpose. Yes. And that implies something bigger than, biology, like who knows why, and they get into metaphysics. But so medicine doesn't think about that. But there is a reason why the voice box is associated with the thyroid, and that's because or sing or yell or hum, you are stimulating your thyroid. And if you are quiet, have a quiet sedentary lifestyle where you don't do a lot of talking, a lot of people are like that today because of computers have replaced talking to a large degree. We text and email. We don't sit around and sing together like we used to. We're much more consumers of entertainment, and there's families are fewer and smaller, and a lot of people are living alone. So there's, depending on your job, people could do very little talking, and they will and may experience hypothyroidism, which could be remedied by stimulating their voices more. Sing, chant, hum. Somebody did that for a couple of hours a day. That would give them more thyroid stimulation. And then there are people who, when they yell, they overstimulate their thyroids, and can become too much yelling. Hyperthyroidism is associated with stress, where people yell during stress too. And I've seen some cases of this where I've known people who just started having issues. They were yelling a lot, and then they ended up with hyperthyroidism.
And that's because they overstimulated the thyroid and caused excess secretion of thyroxine. So they need to not talk so much. They need to lower their voices, don't yell, and give their thyroid a chance to heal, which could take a couple of months.
Okay,
now,
so drill sergeant.
Yeah, well, and I do think, though, now let me tell you some supporting information on this. There are people who are born deaf mutes. They can't speak or hear. And by the time they reach puberty or so, they are hypothyroid and they have to take medication. So the thyroid doesn't develop well in these people who don't speak. So that supports that hypothyroidism and the stimulation of the voice. And I think what happens is when people, if you properly, you don't put it right in your throat. You actually, the focus of the energy can be deeper down in your chest. You try to pull it into your abdomen. People who are professional singers, as opposed to a yell where it's right in your throat and you feel hoarse afterwards. With that kind of yelling where you feel hoarse and strain your throat will most likely result in straining of the thyroid. Now, I didn't write about this in my book, The Doctor Is Out. This thyroid issue I discovered afterwards. In the book, The Doctor Is Out, we discuss another aspect of thyroid problems, which is that if you have a thyroid problem and you go to the doctor, they will most likely use radioactive iodine to determine the activity of your thyroid, because the thyroid takes up iodine. That's a major component of thyroxine. And to see how actively the thyroid is working and how quickly it takes up the iodine, they inject this radioactive iodine into people, and it gets concentrated in their thyroid, in the throat. Now, if they want, afterwards they decide they want to kill the thyroid and take it out because it's not working right, they'll give you more of this radioactive iodine.
Yeah.
So this stuff is like in your throat, which is right near your brainstem, shooting radioactivity, right? It's not good for you. And it's called they destroy the thyroid, ablate. It's called ablation, with burning it basically with radioactive iodine. Then they put you on iodine on thyroid till the rest of your life. So the idea is it's if you give your thyroid a chance to heal. Just because you're low thyroid or high thyroid at a given time, it could be caused by something you're doing, like you're not talking enough. So a nun contacted me. In fact, after I did a radio show where I mentioned this, and she said she was in seclusion for a while and wasn't talking for several years, and now she's low thyroid, so she's going to start singing more. But if you are doing it to yourself by your lifestyle, then you may be able to remedy this by simply using your voice more or less, depending on whether you're low or high thyroid, and give it time. Once you get your thyroid destroyed, the doctor's got you for life. And that's what that book is about. It's about different medical scams, including low thyroid, high blood pressure, and diabetes are all conditions that may very well be temporary and related to lifestyle. But when you go to the doctor, they'll treat it as permanent, and they'll put you on lifetime medication. And the whole idea of,
sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. That's exactly the point. It's like lifetime medication is what they want because that's their business, and they got you hooked for life. And that's really addiction to their medicines. So.
I recently met someone who went through that, in fact, with her thyroid, and they ended up taking it out 100%. And, of course, they're telling her, well, chop it out, and then, well, you need to take this little pill to live. That, she's expected to be on the rest of her life. Censored, I believe it's called. Is there something, is there really a solution after your thyroid has been completely taken out?
No, you're stuck at that point. You need thyroxine, and you got rid of the thyroxine-producing organ.
Okay, wow.
So you got to, that's the point. Now, the problem is, I'd love to get people to try this and just do a self-study. Try it on yourself. Just try singing. Now, it takes a couple of weeks for thyroxine to actually change your cells. So it's not like an immediate thing.
But in a couple of weeks to a month, if a person spent a couple hours a day reading out loud if they needed to, or talking or singing or join a choir or whatever, get your voice working if you're low thyroid and see if what it'll do for you. First of all, if you're singing and doing things like that, that's good for you anyway. You're going to be oxygenating better. You're going to be breathing more. That's good exercise for your lymphatics. It'll pump that. So breathe deeply anyway. But if you're vibrating your thyroid and stimulating it, that might lift your energy, and you will feel that within a month or so. And that's the time frame you'd look for. And so I suggest people do that. The problem is, if they go to the doctor for either low or high thyroid, I say shut up for a while. Look at your life. Have you been yelling a lot? Have you been having fights with your spouse or with your children where there's screaming going on? Have you been doing something when you're straining your voice? And, maybe you don't. That's the thing. I mean, I remember there was this one man I told this to. It happened here in Hawaii. He moved to this place where it was by the coast, beautiful rural road, and people speed, and he didn't like that. So he was out there yelling at everybody to slow down, yelling. I mean, getting very aggravated. It took over his life. He was obsessed, and every time anybody drove by fast, he just felt he had to yell at them. And I hadn't seen him for a while.
I don't know anyone like that. I'm in Hillbillyville. That's great. It's the way it is out here.
Yeah, well, and then I saw him. I hadn't seen him for a while, and I said, well, where have you been? He says, well, I had some health problems. I had thyroid problems, and he got his thyroid ablated with radioactive iodine, and now he's on lifetime medication. So I told him, I have this work that we did where we found its vibration from yelling, and as I'm telling him, a car comes by, and he screams at the car. It was timed perfectly, because here I was like opening his eyes up to what he was doing while he was doing it. Yeah. And from that day on, he does not yell at cars. He's come to peace with that. Hey. But he's taking his thyroxine the rest of his life. And, I have a doctor who told me that his patients want the thyroxine. They use it as speed. They use it to lose weight. They like to tweak their metabolism. So part of the problem is not just the medical profession selling their products, which is a big part of it. The other part of it is people want it. They want these products. They want to they don't want to take care of themselves. They've been sold on the idea of drugs. And they even demand, if a doctor would tell them, if I was practicing medicine, telling people to do things like, just sing if your thyroid's a problem, some people would love it, but other people would be like, this guy's a quack, I need my medicine. Yeah,
just give me some drugs.
Give me the drugs.
Oh, wow. Well,
so
Sydney,
anyway,
how much should we be talking each day for optimally healthy thyroid?
I don't know the answer to that, and I think it's probably an individual thing. And remember, there's the classic mechanism for the thyroid function is a classic endocrinology feedback loop that they teach in medicine, and they love this one because it's one of the first ones ever discovered back in like the 40s or whenever they did this. And they found that there's, in the brain, you have the hypothalamus and the pituitary, and the hypothalamus secretes a releasing factor to the pituitary that makes the pituitary release thyroid stimulating hormone that goes through your bloodstream to the thyroid and makes it release thyroxine, which then goes back into the bloodstream, back to the brain to tell the hypothalamus, okay, we got enough now, we don't need to stimulate it so much. So it's a feedback loop. And they think that's the only way the thyroid works. And they don't even consider the vibration. When they consider the relationship between the throat and the thyroid, their concern is actually, because I called a Voice Institute place that studies this stuff with this information, and they weren't interested because they were focusing on how, for singers, how having a goiter or an enlarged thyroid could affect the voice. They never thought about how the voice could affect the thyroid.
Yeah.
So it's and since there's money in lifetime medication for thyroid disease, what are the chances of anyone wanting to do research into this and focus on it and tell patients about this? None. I mean, there's no money in these answers. Natural remedies have no real financial push. And as a result, medicine doesn't even care. They don't even care about the principles, which is what really disturbs me. There's so many simple things. And this is a good segue now, since we're doing so many subjects on your show tonight, Christie. I'm going to add the issue of flatulence, since you raised the subject earlier.
Yay, we love to fart. Oh, sorry. No.
Well, here's another culturogenic problem. I mean, we have this is a known fact, that the condition called diverticulitis, which is very dangerous and very painful and very common, is mostly suffered by first world people and more affluent people. So it's very culture specific. So they know it's something with lifestyle. And they also know that it's got something to do with increased pressure in the colon. But they don't know whether it's because you don't go to the bathroom enough, or whether it's not enough fiber, or whether it's too much fiber. And they've tested all those things without really good conclusions. So what happens is, though, people are getting these little pockets in their colon wall, little they're like a little cavity that is it's like a bubble in the wall, and these collect material, digestive material, and can get infected. The pocket is called a diverticulum, and when they get infected, it's called diverticulitis. But they don't know what's causing it. But it's sort of very obvious what's causing it, and it's that when you have gas that builds up in your colon and you hold it in, the pressure can be very painful. And what is happening is it's pushing on your colon, which is like a balloon, and it just blebs out a bubble on the side, and it creates these diverticula. So being able to pass wind is you have a choice, either pass wind or blow up, because there's a lot of pressure created by this. And it's also the need to go to the bathroom and not be constipated. You don't want to have that helps create gas, and also when the pressure builds to evacuate, you need to let it go out. The problem is we live in a society where bathroom breaks are very difficult to get sometimes. Yeah. Let's say the average person is let's say you're on the road in your car, you just had lunch, and you're going to the next place, or you're in the office, and you just can't stop what you're doing. You're at a meeting, you just can't necessarily stop and go and defecate. And many people don't like to do that in public bathrooms because they can be pretty disgusting. Yes. And so people will tend to hold it in. And we're taught that, of course, way, way, way back in our childhood with diaper training. Because, what we do with a diaper is basically try, and later wearing clothes, I mean, we have to teach the child somehow to hold in when they feel the urge, and wait until the parent takes off the diaper and gets them ready to the toilet. You have to hold it in, which takes a lot of development to do. That's why it takes some kids a long time to develop. Which, by the way, it's nice to raise your kids without diapers and not have to have that problem if you're in a warm environment and the kids could be naked and just run around. Then it's easy to potty train them. But when you gotta have that extra advanced waiting while the parent recognizes the child squeezing, saying, "Okay, wait, I got to get you to the toilet. Hold it in. Got to bring them to the toilet. Take off the clothes. Take off the diaper. Forget it. They got to have to be 2 years old by the time they're able to hold it in like that. But if you do it younger without having the diaper in the way, it's much easier. And in cultures where we don't have such clothing issues that the kids have to, not soil themselves, this stress issue doesn't exist of toilet training, which is a stressor for a lot of parents. But then the kids learn the idea is to hold it in. And we get rewarded for holding in our waste, whether it's urine or having to defecate or fart. We are told to hold it in, and we pride ourselves on that. And the problem is, when you hold in waste, all the waste-holding organs, the waste elimination organs, are basically getting toxic, depending on how long you're doing it, and they're building up pressure. And, if it's in your bladder and you're holding in urine, your urine is going to concentrate. It's going to get very irritating, and it can increase your chances of getting bladder infections and the kidneys are going to start, and depending on how much you're holding it in, the kidneys, it's going to feed back all the way into them. They're not going to filter as well. I mean, you could really make yourself toxic. And they'll crystallize because it's getting concentrated. It's a salt solution, and you get crystals, which is like stones. Yep. So holding it in is not good. And when it comes to defecating, you need to, and passing wind, you just have to be, sensitive and mature about it. And, we can make fun, and I hope people can read my article about it. It's like, it's important to be able to talk about these taboo topics, because the fact that they're taboo is what gives us health problems. And we can't talk about it. We're not comfortable with it. And we try to hide the fact that we're animals and have to do animalistic things. And that makes
nobody gets mad at a dog when they fart, I know. You laugh, right? I think you brought that up in your article. And so the way I see it, Sydney, and maybe I'm a little, I have been accused of being childish once or twice before, but it's, it's an easy solution, and it actually works to your benefit by letting it rip, so to speak, because isn't laughter the best medicine? I mean, let it rip. And I do want to say this. Now, I've gone through, many dietary changes in my life, and I came from the, standard American diet, where I was sick and, the meat and all the toxic crap in my body, and, having the jobs where you have to hold it in, be polite, and I was toxic. And when I did let it rip, I could permeate walls that, would literally, the people outside the building could smell, okay? But now that my diet is much cleaner, they don't really, I don't think they don't smell offensive. That's just the truth. I think I told you before the show, Sydney, when I break down and have like a thin crust veggie pizza that I did not make myself, that, probably has, definitely the white flour and, garbage like that, perhaps even preservatives and maybe even canned vegetables. I feel it. I feel a difference, and my toots do smell, a little bit foul. They're not, penetrating walls or, killing anyone or anything, but as a general rule, when your diet changes and you eat cleaner, raw, good foods for you, they're not going to stink. So this whole everything I'm reading in the chat is like, oh my gosh, I could never fart in front of somebody. It's just rude. And once again, culturogenic disease. It's part of our programming. So if you're concerned about how your farts stink, you can do something about it by eating better.
And I think another cause of flatulence is stress too. If you're in a stressful situation, some people they react to stress with their intestines, and they'll just start gurgling and building up the gas. And I think all of these things are they're all clues to us to tell us what's going on in our bodies and in our minds and our lives. And if we're wise, we listen to them and we try to figure out, how do we change our lives to stop those things from happening. So, because our bodies are amazing. They heal. They're very powerful. If we stop getting in the way with our culture, we'd be a lot healthier and happier. But, it is a lot to ask. So if we wrapped up today, we're saying, don't wear a bra and fart a lot, and make sure you sing while you're doing it,
Exactly. That's great. Definitely.
Yes, but we would all be a lot happier if we did. But you have to just, when it comes to flatulence, I was actually concerned about that recently, not concerned, but it was interesting because there was a big national story about a federal worker who was being censored for office flatulence, and they actually they couldn't stop this guy, and they were counting how many times a day he was farting, and it was becoming an obsession with everybody in his office, and he was reprimanded, like officially, for too much farting, and that hit the news. It was all over the place. It's really, you have to just try to be sensitive to the situation, maybe go downwind, don't ride in elevators. But, the best advice, I think, is just get a dog, because you have somebody you can always blame it on.
I love that. Sydney, always such a good show, such good information, and really, I mean, we shouldn't be ashamed to talk about these things, like tampons, toilet paper, urinating, farting. I mean, these are all parts of our daily lives. They're totally natural. We shouldn't be embarrassed that we have to burp. It doesn't make you a bad person. It's just, and it doesn't make you rude. I mean, yes, obviously people can do it with, kind of definitely having rude intent. But for the most part, it's totally natural, normal bodily functions, and it's okay. It is okay. So laugh about it.
Yes.
We have about 45 seconds left, Sydney, so please continue.
No, I was just going to say life's a gas. You just have to go along with it.
Excellent. I love that. Thank you so much for joining us here again tonight, Sydney. Thank you all for being here tonight. Abundant blessings and love to you all. We will see you tomorrow night here on SoulJourneysRadio.com. Sing and fart. Woohoo! And then laugh.